Okay, let's get started. I'm painting my little Irish scene on a wooden plaque here. Measures about 8 by 8, so you could use an 8 by 8 canvas. You could use any piece you want to paint this little scene on. It could be nicely painted on a tin piece, a wood piece, canvas. Actually, a fabric tote bag might be fun. But I did choose a wood panel here. So what I've done just to get it prepped is I just put a little coat of a water-based acrylic varnish on there. And that just raises the burr a little bit, and it allows me to give a little fine sand to it and gives me a nice surface that the paint is not gonna just absorb into and not work for me. It gives me a little bit of a nice smooth surface to start. So depending on the piece you have, if it needs to be treated or not, but on bare wood like this, a lot of times that's what I will do. Unless I'm painting the whole background a solid color in acrylic, the acrylic paint then will seal, and I will also still give a little fine sandpaper on it. But here we are, the design is traced on. When I paint, I generally will paint from the background forward. A lot of times I'm going from dark to light, but usually back forward. And then when I lay my colors on, you might see that I start a little darker and then I lighten up a little bit. So let's just jump in. Right now I'm going to start with just the colors for my sky. I have just white here. I've got titanium white, deco art, Snow White, and I'm going to use for my sky, I am using the Deco Art Laguna. It's a little bit of a turquoisey sky. I thought that was a nice color palette to choose with the greens and things. I do think of my color palette a lot before I design a painting. I think it's important to select a few colors, work within those colors, and then the whole painting will be a little more cohesive than randomly picking lots of different colors. So let's jump in, do the sky. Then we'll do our hills in the background, and then we'll do our detail, our sheep, our little shamrocks, and our little Irish cottage. The details, of course, the real fine details will come in later. That's always my favorite part, but we have to get the work done first to get the background painted. So let's just go right into, again, it's the Laguna in a white. I am going to do a lighter color at the horizon there, and I'm going to get a little darker as we get up into the sky. Then we'll add some clouds. I'll show you a really nice, easy, quick technique for clouds. So let me get a little bit of the Laguna, and I'm going to get some white because, again, I wanted it to be a little lighter shade across the horizon. And I'm just going to get right across the top of my little hill that's traced on there. I'm using a flat brush. This is a 1/2 inch. I use a lot of flat brushes because what I love is I can get a nice broad stroke like you see here, but I can also get a nice thin line if I need to. So it's very versatile. I do use flats a lot. I want you to use whatever's comfortable with you though. When I tell you what I'm doing, it's how I'm doing it. It doesn't mean it's the right way or the only way something can be done. I love to share all my ideas, but I love it when you take it off yourself and change up the colors, for instance, in a design. You can take the technique we're doing here for the little sheep and paint a whole field of sheep, just varying the sizes. So feel free to pick apart my lessons and patterns and make them your own. And I would love to see your results of your painting as well, so please share that. So I've gotten a little bit lighter down here at the horizon. I'm not worrying about getting around that shamrock perfectly because I know I'm coming with a darker green afterwards. So I'm trying to go around my pattern, but I'm not going to, you know, get too bogged down with getting it just so right now. So if I need a second coat in places, I can come back and do that. We always want to wait for our first coat to dry well before we go ahead and add a second coat. I know we're impatient sometimes and we just want to get to that end result, but if you don't let the paint dry in between the coats, you will just pull off that initial coat. So see, I'm going to go now, I've mixed just a tiny bit of Laguna in with my white to get my light shade. Now I'm just using that same dirty brush, just picking up more of the Laguna. And what I want to do is sort of get my soft blend before I move on. That's why I'm working from the base up. So I still have wet paint here. I can still just sort of soften that and get a nice blend. If I need to, I just wipe off the paint on my brush and just am using that simply as a dry brush to blend. So try to blend as you go. And so acrylics, as you know, are quick drying, which is great in a lot of instances, but is a problem sometimes when you really want to take your time and do some nice blending. In that case, I sort of try to force my acrylics to work as oils. I'm an oil painter as well. I love oil painting. I love the fact that you can have all that time to blend, but again, I like the quick drying of the acrylics because then I can just go ahead and put details on top and multiple coats and whatnot. So I can see through here a little bit, so I might come back and do a little bit of a second coat. When your acrylic paint, especially yellows or oranges, are transparent, adding a little white gives it a little more opaque finish. So if I add a little bit of white to that paint now, it might prevent me from having to add a second coat. And I don't mind textures. I paint a little painterly sometimes. I see how I'm moving my brush like little X strokes and kind of not just going back and forth. I do that on purpose because it gives me a little bit of texture in what I'm painting, and it does not show all the streaks. If I was painting water, yes, I would go back and forth and I would encourage those streaks. But here, a little bit of, just a little tad of white in there is helping it with the coverage. Now I want to get over here a little bit before this is pretty dry already, so I'm going to go ahead and just almost try to match that color a little bit. This is dry, this is still wet. If you can see, I'm using the paint on the brush, I'm forcing it down in a little bit of a textured stroke so that it, again, sort of all just blends. Getting straight Laguna there now. I want to get, like I said, a little darker at the top. I'll just get a little line across there. Not quite sure when I'm going to paint these edges yet. I'm going to wait till I'm done, and then we're going to pick one of the colors that we like. Again, this could even just be a stained edge. It could be just stained. You could just stain the wood if you like that look of wood, or it could be painted and painted in distressed or painted in antiqued. So there we are. We've got most of that covered. I'm going to just take my brush back into the white, just like when I started, because I just want to get a little bit of a second coat on there. I can see through there a little bit. See how fast I'm working just to get that blended back up. But I do like sometimes when I can just get a little texture in when I'm painting. Brush is very dry at this point. A lot of times I have a paper towel in my hand just to wipe off what is on there in case I'm picking up other colors, depending on what I'm painting. And there we are. I think that's coverage is pretty good. We're going to put some clouds in our sky there. Okay, so a nice little trick to make pretty simple clouds. I'm just going to use the dirty brush. When I do my clouds, I want them to be a little bit heavier on the tippy tops, then sort of fade away into the background, make them look more natural. If we have a heavy cloud and we have it heavy on all of the sides, it starts to look like it's pasted on. We want it to sort of be wispy and fade into the background. Less is more. You can always build up the paint, but it's hard if you take a big glob of paint and put it on. You can paint over it, of course, but so start with that dirty brush, right? I'm taking a little, just side loading my brush with that white a little bit, wiping quite a bit off. That's where I don't want to go onto the surface with a big load of paint. I want to go super light because I can always darken it up. My trick for clouds, I know it's a little formula-like, but it does work. I use the tip of the white brush there, and I start making some little puffy clouds. And like I said, less is more. That's almost enough. If you started with even less, that's okay. If you want a little cloud formation that's going to be in front of that, you can kind of puff that in there. So I'm doing these little half circle strokes. I sort of bring them out to each side and sort of fade them away. You can have as many or as few or no clouds. It's up to you. But I want a little something in the sky, so I'm going to just do some of these clouds. At this point, the brush is pretty dry. I have a little bit of paint up here, but I can just use that dry brush now if I need to, just soften those clouds into the background. Sometimes it could be simple as just a little bit of whatever's left on the brush, sort of just wisps in the background. I don't want to overdo it, but I did want to show you that technique. Now, if it was super light and it wasn't as highlighted there as you like, you just take a tiny bit more of your white, always pat it off, and you could go back on and get them a little brighter in places if you need to. I generally like to have a very soft look, though. And we can always come back later on and deepen them up once we look at it and see how the whole painting is looking together. And let's just leave that be, because we don't want to spend too much time. Sometimes if you spend too much time on an element or a section, you really overwork it. With the acrylics, it's wonderful. You can come back later and add anything you need to. So we're going to jump in and fill in our hills in the background. I want each section to be a little bit different green. So I'm just picking out a few different greens. I need a dark green, so I'm going to use this black forest. I'm going to use, this is a nice jewel green because it's a little bit on the blue-green side, which I'm got kind of a palette of blue-green going here. I've got festive green. And I do like, for a little highlight and some of the bright areas, sour apple. I am going to keep with a blue-green theme, so I'm going to throw out a little bit of this tropical blue. I may mix that with some of my green for my darks. I love that blue-green turquoisey color palette. And I'm still going to use a flat brush. You can adjust the size to the areas that you're doing here. And let's just jump in and we'll get this back section here done. As long as each section's a little different, I'm just going to go ahead to start just to base coat in, because it's going to maybe take a couple coats. So let's just get the surface covered. Sometimes when I'm painting on a wood panel like this, I like the grain of the wood showing through. I'm not going to really do that too much in this painting, I don't think, but sometimes I use that to my advantage as kind of a little bit of a washy look. We're going to go painting around our little cottage. And this is the jewel green that I'm working, and it is no rhyme or reason why I chose this for the back section. So just pick out 3 shades of green you like. You don't have to always use the same paint color as I am. Pick out something that you like. Just make sure it's 3 different shades. And we're going to end up with them being a little lighter on the back side of the hill, a little darker where the hill in front is crossing. But to get started, let's just get 1 coat on here of each of those colors. Then we'll come back in and blend a little bit. I think I missed a little line here on my tracing. I kind of want to have another hill there. So there we are. So I think I'll use that color on this hill. I'm going to paint right over the stems of the shamrock. We can paint those on later. They're just going to be with a liner brush. And this brush is maybe a little small for filling this in, but it's in my hand, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. This is a fun little scene for spring, St. Patrick's Day. It'll give you like a little lesson on the clouds. It'll give you a little lesson on sheep. And again, you can take these things apart and use them, in different paintings. I am going into another green, so I just dried my brush off on my paper towel. I'm not going to worry about rinsing that at this point. Let's get a dark green here. And this is just the base coat, so we can go ahead and highlight and whatnot these sections later. Some paintings I've done, I'm not going to do so much of a pattern on these, but sometimes when I've done these green fields like this, I'll put a little patchwork pattern on them. I'll make smaller sections and make like the green fields of Ireland with all the little patches and little designs. That could be fun. You could do that on this pattern as well, but I'm keeping this a little simpler. We're just going to shade and highlight the fields. And it's a little bit of patience, as you know, for a lot of the base coating. I find it relaxing, to be honest. But I do love getting to the end where we put all our details in there. Really highlights and really make the paintings pop. think I'll do this front section, and I really can go to a bigger brush. Let's see, I'll just start with this one. I'm gonna do that brighter green there. So I was talking about painting with a particular color palette and how important sometimes I find that. You might not even realize it sometimes, but if you're looking at a painting and it really appeals to you, you really like it, but you really don't even know why, it could very well be the color palette. Everybody has colors that they like. It's sort of incorporating them into your paintings will start to give, people are trying to develop their style, their paint, the way they like to paint, and being a recognizable style. A lot of times that has to do with your color palette. I love turquoises and teals and pinks, which are funny because I'm not a pink person really at all. I wouldn't wear pink so much, but I love it in my paintings. I love the way it plays off pink. So a lot of times my paintings are a little recognizable because I'm using those colors a lot. And I keep in a color palette. So if in a limited color palette is not a bad thing either sometimes. I will use a certain number of colors, and then to get any other colors I need, I will simply mix those together. That is a little trick to keep all your whole painting a little bit, again, more cohesive. Let's jump back here and just use that green. So even if we base coat an area with the same green, we can change it up with our shadows and our highlights and make it slightly different too. So sometimes kind of keep an eye on paintings that you look at and they really appeal to you, but you're not sure why. Start jotting down things you like about it, notes on color and whatnot, and incorporate that sometimes into your painting and your designs. It might be a fun little project. I'm just going to put a quick second coat here. That's covering really nice, that second coat. I'm going to paint it in fairly quick again so I can come back and maybe get my highlights and my shadows in wet. I usually blend two ways, wet and wet, where I work kind of quickly, or side loading. Those are interchangeable a lot of times to get the result. I'm going to take and get my dark black forest here with a little bit of that blue, which was the tropical. And let's see if we can get it a little darker at the base here. And that will pop even a little more once I get lighter on the next little hill in front. But I want to get a little darker here. A little darker. Could be a little darker around the house even, just to set that off, a little cottage. It doesn't show up, it's a very similar tone as our rest of our hill, so we will just lighten up that rest, maybe just with a little white into that green, so that we can get it a little lighter across the top. And it's still a little wet and wet, so it's giving me a little blend. But sometimes, like I say, with just a very slight dry brush, I could just kind of make those little brush strokes. And you'll see me doing this in quite a bit. And it really is kind of a nice texture to those mountains back there. Get a little lighter on the tippy top. This is nice because it's almost the color of the sky. And it could be the sky reflecting down on the top of that little hill. And to deepen these shadows, I can come back later with a side load of a darker color. So there's that hill done. Why don't we do this one at the same time, since we'll do it similarly. I might get a darker blue even. Let's just try this again. use this a little darker there, darker around her sheep. And I am always putting my painting upside down and sideways and here and there just to get at certain areas a little easier. And softening that while I can. Now, this is also a time where you could use some extender or retarder to, you know, extend the drying time of your paints. I sometimes use it. A lot of times I just try to work quickly and just camouflage anything with just some brush strokes like this. But there are times when I want to side load or really get a nice blend, I will use some sort of an extender. All right, why don't we go on the back side here and do this little guy up here, this little section. So that was started with the festive green. So let's just give it a quick coat of that. I really like painting on the smooth surface of the wood. I'll do a lot of vintage tin pieces and whatnot, same surface. I paint a lot on canvas. There you have to really dig in a little bit and get those nooks and crannies of the canvas covered. But think outside the box sometimes of surfaces, because you can paint on just about anything. And this is a nice shape. This square format, which I do like a lot, is nice like on a tote bag or something. A little darker. I'll go around my sheep as a little shadow there too. Dry off my brush just to use that dry brush to blend a bit. And a little lighter, maybe just a little white in there. Get that little highlight on the back of that hill. Again, see the little, just barely any paint on the brush, and just using it for texture back here. I may just go back in now and get a little shadow around this little shamrock there. Drawing off my brush just to soften that in a bit. And I can reinforce those later like I'm going to on these bits. Let's get this foreground done. I'm going to grab a tiny bit more of this festive green. I'm going to switch over to a little bit bigger brush. Oh, you know what I forgot is in between, underneath the little sheep's legs. So I'll just fill that in a second. Again, I'm not being super careful. I'm going around the shamrocks best I can, but I can touch those up when I paint them. Oops. I just got a little bit of green over here. I don't know how that flew off my brush there, but again, the great thing about acrylics is you can fix anything. If you can see my, I think you can see a little bit of my palette there. Let's pull that over some. What I'm using there for a palette is kind of my homemade Stay Wet palette. It's just a big glass palette, which is great to work on too. But I just soak paper towels, and then I have those sheets of parchment paper you get in the box, and you just pull out a sheet. And this will keep my paint wet for all day painting, sometimes the next day. And I do have the Stay Wet palette, which I use for some things, but this just works really well for me. So just simply a piece of glass, wet paper towels, and parchment paper. Couldn't be simpler. This is a little see-through still, so I'm going to let that dry and do another coat. But I'm going to go back over here and get this hill done. This is the one that we base coated with the Black Forest green. I think I'll need a little more of that. And then I'm going to tuck the paint underneath the sheep there, where we forgot it. And we're going to get pretty much the background and the foreground all painted now, which is kind of nice. Just get that work done, and we'll do that little cottage. We'll work up to our sheep, and then we'll do our shamrocks last. And then take a look and see what we need. Now I want a nice dark behind here. I might take just a little black on the corner of my brush. Get that back there. It's kind of side-loaded, wet and wet. And now let's get this tucked in what we need to under here. It's going to be kind of dark under there, so I'm going to go to that little pile of paint that was already had some black mixed into it. And let's just do this. And I'm going to use this more blue-green, this jewel. It's the jewel green. I do love that green. And we're just going to fill in under our sheep here where that belongs. I know I had a little shadow on the bottom side there. That's this black forest and the tropical blue. And we will just get a little shadow behind there. That is all we really need. Okay, back here, this is our black forest. We're going to lighten that up, but let's just get a little second coat there to cover some of the streakiness. And now I'm going to go right into this festive green across the back top here. Start lightening that up a little bit. Gonna let that dry a little bit. Again, I'm taking that little bit lighter color and just give it a little texture back there. And I'm going to get that a little lighter, but I'm going to let that dry a bit. I think I want to get a little darker back in this little crevice here. So I've gone right into this. This is my darker mix. It's the black forest and the tropical blue. Just softly dry brushing that back there. Just adding a little of the background festive green to sort of just get a little bit wet and wet again there. I might add in a little bit of yellow now. I can dry brush that in a little bit here and there. And I'm going to go with the bright yellow. Just put a little bit there. I think that might be kind of nice. I just used the dirty brush, went right into it. That might be kind of nice for a highlight here too. Again, that texture I like. Let that dry a little bit still itself. And this is just dry now, and that's the festive green. A little more. Trying to be better about not getting way too much paint out, because I do that a lot. It's kind of a waste. So I've been trying to put just smaller bits out. Still just kind of just putting on that second coat. Might be a third. Is there a third? I can't remember. Let's get it dark in this little crease here now. Go right into my little dark mix with that brush. Picking up a lot of the light green, I'll just wipe it off so I can get a little back into that dark. Wet and wet, so it's allowing me to blend nicely. And again, I can deepen up the dark shadow after with a wash if I need to. I've got a little bit of my green on there. We'll just scoop it off. Okay, this has got to dry a little bit now for me to come in and get some of my darks in and some highlights of light. I think I can actually, though, brush a little bit of the yellow on there while it's a little wet. Let's just take some of that bright yellow, use it as our light for the top here. That kind of is a nice look. Brushing it right over that wet paint. Get down a bit. And then I'm just going to reinforce all of this afterwards, a little bit lighter, a little bit darker in places. And again, so example of just taking a little bit of the dry paint on the brush and just texture. Okay, let that dry a bit. All right, let's just work on our little cottage to start. I do a lot of little cottages, and they're pretty simply done. It's a white stucco Irish cottage with a little thatch roof. So for the body of the cottage, I do it kind of in some gray tones, and then with some white on top to make it look a little like the stucco. So I'm going to go ahead with the laurel. It's a little bit, it's grayish, but it is kind of a green, tealy gray. I'm going to keep this pushed over. I like so you can see my palette sometimes. Instead of just like black mixed with white, I'm going to use this thicket. It's a nice shade. And so where we see it's going to be the stucco, we'll just paint it in with that thicket. One coat is fine for this. Coverage is pretty good. Again, I'm using a little flat, but you could use whatever size brush works for you. And I'm going to underpaint the thatched roof with deep ochre. This color I use a lot. I really like that Deco Art deep ochre. It's like a yellow ochre. Really a nice color. Also going to grab some burnt sienna because I am going to use a little burnt sienna for the shadows. So let's just paint that roof in. Oops, didn't mean to dip into that burnt sienna yet. Okay, so I am going to have it a little darker along the bottom edge. If this is a thatch cottage, the bottom is where the thatch is cut. It has a little bit of a shadow along there. So I'm just going to get a little burnt sienna right on top of that wet paint. There. I might as well fill in the windows and the door. I'm going to make it one of those little half doors you see on the cottages. So I do have some black out up here. I'm going to take a little black. And what I love about sometimes my little square brushes, I have a good variety of sizes because I can go in and sometimes just lay in the windows, sometimes with just one stroke. Here I'm just doing two, but it squares off nice. Top of that little door, I know it's tiny, is just one of those half doors. And for the bottom, I'm going to do it kind of like a red, pinkish door. So I'm going to just take a little touch of this antique maroon. Antique maroon is a Deco Art color, but a lot of times I'll just take, if I have red on my palette and black, I'll just mix a little of that, and that gives you a lovely maroon too. So we're just going to make the bottom of the door. I'm going to make it a little pinky later, but for now I'm base coating it just with that antique maroon. And the thatched roof, let's It's dry. Actually, the paint is all dry. So I want to get the stucco look on here. So I'm taking some white on my brush. I'm not going to take in a big brush load of white and try to cover this solid. I want it to have the gray show through. Some areas are going to be a little brighter white, but I'm basically, it's kind of a dryish brush with that, just the white paint, but see, I'm hitting it very lightly. It's a dry brush, and you're getting kind of a stucco-y look, right? I'm almost got too little paint on there. Like I said, I'd rather start with too little and pick up a little more than too much, because then it would look like you're just painting the white on. So when I need it, I pick up a little more. And I'm just going to go over any of the area that's going to be stucco. You could use a little round brush if you need to for this. And just be a little careful around. I think my windows and doors are a little wet still, but I just want to get a little white on there. So where this is going to be even brighter in a highlight of the white, I'm getting a little heavier with the white here. Just down the front of the chimney, down the side there, and here. That is a little brighter. You can see it's almost being hit by the sun. A little sunlight hitting that. I want it darker under the eaves. I want it a little dark on that side, but I am going to just highlight this lower corner here. And I do want to keep this hill nice and straight, so let me just do that with just a clean brush there. And then I just kind of dab it on here and there where it needs to be a little brighter. Dabbing it because then it's a little stucco-y like, if that makes sense. And I do this little bit, this section a little more, just so it's nice and bright. And I think that's good. Okay, let's get our thatched roof done. I'm gonna go to a round brush for that, because I want to get it lighter at the tippy top. Actually, let me get a little bit of a better shadow. So I'm going to take a little burnt sienna that's a little watery on my brush and just kind of get that little front line in there. And now I'm going to use just some white with that deep ochre, lightening that up a little bit, because I want to have it a little brighter at the top here. And then I'm kind of just going to streak it down a little bit. Gonna get some more deep ochre back in there. I kind of want it to look like little lines. It can come down rough on that little shadow there because this is the thatch coming down on top. I can grab a little of that yellow even that's right there. That's the bright yellow. And I'll dry that off, take a little fresh white. I want to get just a little bit of a highlight right across the top of that roof. And I wanted to even it off because my brush strokes were getting a little bit uneven. So that's just going to stay a little brighter there. And I'm going to go back and just clean up that edge now. I kind of overlapped here a little bit. Let's just clean that up with a little bit of a clean brush there. We can put some little smoke curling out of those little chimneys too. I'm going to grab a little of the pink that I'm going to use for the door. This is just the dragon fruit. Again, these are the colors I happen to be using, colors that I like. If you have a pink of any sort or red and a little white, just go ahead and use that. Oh, you know what I'm going to do is some little window boxes. I know it's teeny, but if we just kind of stroke a little of that pink on top of that maroon. And I'm going to I could have just done the same thing, a little maroon for the window boxes, but I'm just going to mix a little maroon with my pink. And little window boxes. So that those windows in the top of that door don't look like a black hole. I might just go back into some of this blue. That was the tropical. Take a little white. So just a little bit of a light blue I could just dab into the doorways and the windows. If I was doing a bigger cottage, I've done bigger paintings of cottage, I would put a little lace window, little lace curtain in the windows, which I've done. I don't think we need to do that on this one. So for some greenery, we'll just take some of our green here. That's the festive, and we'll just dab that like it's a little bit of greenery. the window boxes. Get a little dark in there, just a shadow. This is minute, so really you don't have to do too much of that. Okay, that's it for our cottage. Good enough, except for maybe some smoke coming out when I'm gonna just finish up these hills just to get them. For instance, let's just get this one a little bit lighter on the back side here. I'll go back into my yellow. Bring that across the front. Bring some of that down. Can even try some of the sour apple. I just wanted to get that a little lighter. I'm going to go back in. The base coat there is the Black Forest, and if I can mix that a little bit in there, it just gives me a little brighter top there. And I want to get a little bit brighter yellow on the top of this little hill here. Now that that's dry, I can get that to show up just a slightly bit more. I need a little more of that yellow. I think it's this. No, that's cad. I want the bright yellow. Glaze almost like a little bit of yellow back here on that hill just to brighten it up a bit. I'm going to get a little bit of stronger shadow on these jewel green sections. Maybe a little of this blue and green back in. Just slightly darker. It's not a lot. It's that Black Forest and tropical blue. There, I think we've got some nice depth into our fields. If you wanted some texture, you could even dab in like an old, let's see if I have an old ratty brush or a little bit of a sponge or something for some texture in there. Let's see. Maybe even like a mop brush. Well, this one's in the front. We could always get a little bit of texture in there. Just on that front one, that would be a little bit more in focus for us. And again, you could do all sorts of things. We're going to make those shamrocks coming up here just to add a little touch of Irish to this. But you could put blades of grass. You could do all sorts of things if you wanted. I think my little window boxes back here just need a little pop of a lighter green. I'm almost going to do it with just little dots. I love a little pop of bright on top of a dark. Okay, cool. Hills are done. Sky is done. Cottage. Now our fun little sheep. And then we'll do our shamrocks. So this little sheep, I base coat my sheep with buttermilk, the Deco Art buttermilk, which I use quite a bit of, as you can see by the big jar I have of it. So the white of the sheep is going to be the buttermilk. So let's just paint that in. We made him kind of round and furry and fuzzy. He needs to be shorn, I think. He's got quite a coat on him there. And we're going to do his face, his ears, his legs in the black, but we're going to highlight a little bit with the Thicket paint. The Thicket, I believe the color was going to use for the highlighting of the face, or a light blue maybe. Whenever I'm painting anything black, and you need a highlight for black, right? You tend to think, oh, well, white, that's light. But then it looks gray. So if I'm doing animal fur, people's hair, that sort of thing, I would use, if it's black, I'm going to use a light blue to highlight. I think that's what we'll do with our sheep. Even if I'm doing a black object, a lot of times I will use light blue as my highlight. I might do a quick second coat on there, but let's leave that and paint in the black sections of the face, ears, whatnot. Inside of the ear is going to be a little pink, but the outside of the ear is straight black. So I'm going to just kind of do this little shape. And let's just get the face started. Shadow under this bit will be dark, so that's black. Outside edge of the face is black. If I'm doing tiny sheep, sometimes I'll do a whole field of tiny sheep. I'll just do their faces all black and then just give them a little swipe of light blue down one side. But this guy's bigger and facing us. So let's just take now, just dry that off, go right into the tropical blue and get the middle of the face a little lighter. Blue, the black is strong, so it's going to try to take over, but we'll just get a little bit. I like the blue better than the thicket, but we're going to come back and after this is just a little dry and drag more of that blue in. I'm going to also go a little bit on the edge of the ear with some blue. It's not really noticeable, but it will be when we come back and just go a little lighter. Little legs. We will highlight with some blue on top after. Making them a little wider at the bottom and tapering up a little thinner. We'll do a little shadow maybe underneath this guy after. Okay, so that's starting to dry a little bit now. I could go in and get a little more blue on there. Inside of the ears, I want it pinkish but not bright pink, so I'm just going to go in now with, maybe I'll grab some of that thicket. I'm going to put pink on top, but I just want to have a little bit of a dark underbase here. Could have just used a gray if you want to mix that up, but I had that thicket out. A little black in there still. It's just a dark gray of any sort, really. I'm going to rinse that black off my brush now. Oh, you know what? I didn't go up high enough on the front legs. So back into the black we go because they have to come up. They're closer there. That's our front legs. Okay. Now I'll rinse that off. I'm going to give a quick little second coat to where I need it of the buttermilk. And I don't even mind if my paint is a little thick here. Usually I'm saying get your paint nice and thin coats. But the texture on this sheep could be built up with your paint. So I don't mind it being a little bit thick. Kind of dabby strokes just to, first of all, it'll cover better. And it's just giving me a little texture. I'm going to get a little shadow under the, behind the head. So I'm going to, just the dirty brush that has the buttermilk, I wiped most of it off. I'm going to take a little bit of thicket on the side of my square. And I'm going to get just a little shadow around the face. It's wet and wet there now, so I can kind of brush that out a little bit. Reload. Get a little from under the ear there. And just to give us a little shadow here and there, I can take that extra paint and just kind of dab it in here and there. Okay. And we'll go back and finish our little face. So in this ear, I'm going to take the dragon fruit that we brought out previously, a little bit. I'm going to just take it and dry most of it off because I want just to be a little bit of a hint of pink in there. Oops, didn't mean to grab that black, but I don't want to just paint the whole thing pink. So let's just wipe out that little bit of black I accidentally picked up there. So a little white, little pink on my brush, but wiping most of it off and just kind of dabbing that in. So I can see the gray through it, but yet it's going to be a little pink. And I'm going to make pink cheeks on this guy when his face is done and dry, though. So, pretty dry. Let's go back into our tropical blue. Get that. I want the middle of his face lighter. I'm sort of dry brushing that right on top of the black. I think I want a little bit of highlight on these ears, just on the tippy tops. And I somehow dragged some more black in there. Okay. I'm going to get a little bit of black back out on the outside edge of his face just to even up where I went in there with the buttermilk. I'm just going to kind of go along and clean that up. Right around the face. Now I don't want it to look like that harsh line, so dry off your brush, and then you can just sort of scoot that in. I'm going to go back in and give it one little bit more of the blue. And that way I can go out and kind of bring that into the edge as well, just to soften that again. And it doesn't seem like such a harsh edge. It's a little wet there. I'm going to let that dry. A little scooch more of blue, but I'm going to get the legs now, so a little of that blue on the legs. And if it dries and we don't see it, I might do a second coat, but that's nice there. And I'm going to just use my round brush to really get it where I want on the top of his ears. A little bright, but that's okay. Just going to soften it now. There. Coming along, I think. With a dry brush. And I'm just building this up till I like the way it looks. And I can stand back and see that little slightly lighter middle of the face. Makes it look 3D. That's what I was going to say before when I was talking about the couple of different ways that I blend. Lights and darks values are what really make a two-dimensional surface have some 3D elements on it. It's how you shade and how you highlight. And the way in acrylics that I find that works for me is either wet and wet like we've been doing, or sometimes side loading, and then you get your darks and lights. But darks and lights and values are another important part of your paintings. This is going to bug me, and it's tiny, and it's nothing that you should even worry about, but underneath here it just looks like it just needs a quick little second coat of that green because I can see through it. And just a little yellow at the backs right there. It really, no one would notice it in a million years, but start as I'm finishing up looking at all the things. Okay, so a fun way to do the fur. It's kind of almost a little bit decorative, and I'm going to do some finer line work, circle-y little spirals, but I'm going to start with I've got just a round brush. I'm going to go a little heavy with my white first because again, texture, and I want it to show up. So white against the buttermilk, it's not a big contrast. But if I just pop my brush on and start doing spirals, and And I want to go right out over so it's like the fur is, you know, kind of loose like this. So I'm really just putting my brush down and spiraling out, getting more paint when I need to, and leaning into having some of that paint thick. I was going to say, a lot of times when I do detail, I really thin my paint down to be more like ink so that it flows nice. But here, I have to work to get the white to show up over the buttermilk. So I want to have it on the thick side. And it looks good like where you have some shading and things. I'm not gonna make it overlap onto the face because the head is on top of the body, but on the body itself down here, these little spirals can come right out over the edge. It's a lot of reloading your brush, but just simply a nice little texture of spirals. Sometimes, like I said, when I do a whole field of small little sheep, they're too small to do this on, I'll simply put little textured dots all over their body, and that kind of gives them that bumpy little fuzzy look. So close to the face, I'm just being careful to make it come out from under. It's not going to come out on top like we're doing here on the edge. And you can do this as many times to get the desired look that you like. Back these front legs, we really don't want the curls to come over that. They can come over this part, but these legs are in front of this bit of fur, so I don't want to put it on top of the sides there, if that makes sense. Kind of like little spirals, little springs. There, and we can just keep looking at that and seeing it as it dries. We want to get it a little bit brighter. I can look back at my little house here, and if it looks a little dull, I could get a little more highlights on those. I'm always looking at the rest of the painting as I'm finishing up. And we can do actually a little bit of smoke. So I'm taking my same round brush. I had white paint on it. I've added some water, and I want to just get a little thin, transparent wisps. And I can just do some little smoke coming out of those chimneys. I'm going to do the face now, then we'll add a little more white, because you can get a heavier brush, a bigger brush. You can get as puffy as you want on this guy. I'm going to let that dry what's there. But I'm going to do a pretty simple face on this one. Let's just get little cheeks. Maybe I'll go back, maybe my mop brush, or maybe a smaller mop brush. Let's see. I just want to get a couple of cheeks. This feels like it's going to be too big for me. Let me see. Maybe something like this. So I'm just going into the dragon fruit, and I'm patting it off quite a bit. And I'm just going to get two little cheeks. I'm going to do, I was unsure of eyes on him, but because he's so dark, his face, I think we need white eyes with the black pupils. We can certainly just use the back end of our brush maybe to get the eyes. I might make him looking to the side or something. Let's just give him 2 eyeballs. That is a little big. I'm gonna make this one a little bit more the same size. Okay, let that dry a bit. It's a little out of shape. No one would notice. And I got a little bit of white smudged up here. If you wanted your clouds to be a little lighter, you could do that. Sometimes just for a little texture, I might take a thin little linery brush. A little liner brush with some white. Really a lot of water. I don't want it to be outliney because it's a cloud. But I could go up here. Because we have the texture here and texture other places, it might be fun to just do a little texture on the tippy tops of the clouds. It really doesn't need it, but I just wanted to try and see what it looks like. A little texture there. I think it might be a good time to stop base coating in these 4 shamrocks. So we can just go with using the greens that we have here. And we want them to be solidly covered, so we'll probably need 2, maybe 3 coats there. Let's get a dark one up here. I'm looking at the light sky, so I want one that really shows. So I'm just going to follow the pattern here. I'll get a liner and make some stems for them as well. I think this jewel green would be good for this one. Yeah, we'll need a couple coats on these guys. I think this one will be good as the jewel green. I'm kind of keeping away from the color that it's sitting on. And this one will be nice as a light one. Mixing that a little bit sour apple with the festive. I want to get it light after, but for coverage sake, I'm going to use a little of the festive green. Our eyes will take a little while to dry. They're so thick, so when those are dry, we'll finish the eyes. A lot of times when I'm painting animals or people or something, I like to get the features done. It gives them a little personality. It's not so zombie-like looking. So for coverage, so this is really transparent, this coverage here, but like I said, sometimes if you add a little bit of white just to make it more opaque, then we can get even back to that lime green after. But if I fill it in a little bit with some of the white. Now I'm going to get a liner brush to get the stems because that is a bit easier. I want a nice long liner brush, so I'm going to probably use this one. Now I'm going back to my littler one. Okay, so I'm just going to get the colors that we need for a stem. Let me look at my sketch because I kind of want them to be a little curvy. And I'm going to paint it in just with this color now. It's not going to show up a lot, but I will lighten and darken it. I just want to kind of place it. That was the jewel green there. And we will, like I said, highlight and give that some shadows. Now we know where they are anyway. All right. Little mouth and nose are so simple. We're just going to do black lines. Let's see, like there's just a little nose, a little, oops, a little line here, simple little smile. I kind of, that liner was a little long for that. Let me clean that up a tiny bit. It's looking a little wonky. Just with a clean brush here. Reshape that little bit. It really needs eyeballs, but I want to get a little bit, maybe a little lighter in the pink in his ears. I'll just go right back into that dragon fruit and just kind of softly pat some of that in. Take that same brush load, take a little tiny bit of white, and on the cheeks I could get a little bit of a highlight. Okay, I'm going to go a little heavier with some of my fleece there. This is a place to stand back and just look. Sometimes I'll just dab on some white just for that texture. And just get a little second coat here and there. A little heavier. Same shapes I'm kind of doing, but a little heavier, more paint on the brush. And again, just stand back and see where you might want to leave it. I'm going to dab some little heavy brushes, strokes there. There, let me hold that back. Yeah, I think he looks cute. I made him really big to be closer towards us, so the little cottage would be kind of in the back there. Let's get a second coat on of our shamrocks now. So do the same color, just get a second coat. And we'll just give a little detail to the shamrock centers and almost done with this piece. I think I might like the jewel green for the edges. Okay, now we'll get that light green one done. same thing with the stems. Now we just need a little bit of highlighting on those guys, maybe some shading. Let's see if we can get the little eyeballs in because he's looking a little like a zombie, and I want to lighten up maybe those lines for the outline of the nose there. It's because it's on that blue, it's not very bright. Let's try a light blue to highlight that. Let's see, white with a little of our tropical blue. Try not to touch the heavy white paint because that's a little wet still. So I'm going to do that little highlight on the mouth and nose area there. Okay, some eyes. I want to make them look into the side, so let's get a little shape of one of the ends of my brushes. That might be a good size. I'll plop it right into our black. It's looking a little to the side. A little to the side. One eye looks a little bigger. Let's see. One pupil. Not bad. A little white highlight after that's dry, but it's going to take a while. It's very thick paint. I got a little bit of something caught there. Okay. Now, the shamrocks are about dry. I'm going to just get the little bit of a highlight or some on the light ones, maybe a shadow. Okay, so let's just get a little bit of darker green here. And I'm going to just do a little bit of a darker green along the side of this stem as a shadow. That'll work for this jewel green too. Thinning it down because it's been sitting out a little bit, but I also want it to flow nicely for me. Just kind of going down the right side a little bit. Got a little bit wide there. Going a little lighter. I'm just going to use that same brush onto this forest green. It almost looks black, so I really want to lighten that up a little bit. Getting a little lighter still. Jewel green, if I just take a little white, it'll lighten it up a bit. Let's see for the highlight there. little flat brush just to give some highlights and shadows to these little shamrocks. I'm gonna just go a little darker green, say for on this little one here. I'm just gonna kind of a little bit of a, get a little darker there. Just doing this with the chisel edge of the flat. You could use a little round if you wanted. I just want to get a little dark in the middle there. So I'm just going to go slightly darker than whatever it is I'm looking at here. So back to that black forest green and our tropical blue to get a little bit of a dark blue green. Same over here. This guy is so dark, we're going to go lighter on that one. I'll try the jewel green. A little white with that might help. Okay, we're almost done here, guys. I'm going to give a little white highlight to my eyes. Just a little dot. And now let's finish up. I'm going to do a little bit of decorative work on these shamrocks. So I'm going to just take, I'm going to use my small round brush. Let's see, I might even get a little smaller. And I'll start with this light lime green one. I want to get even lighter on the petals. A little white with that sour apple might do the trick. I'm just going to give these little lines that you'll see on shamrocks or clovers sometimes, right on top of where I did the darker ones. Add as much white as you need so that you can see it. A little lighter than that, I think. Use that for a little highlight. Going to give it a little dot in the middle, and maybe a little outline, not quite so white. A little outline of the tip of these petals. So it's just a little decorative touch, but see how it just brings it out. Okay, now I'm going to get onto more of the jewelly green shade. So I'm going to get into that jewel green and some white. Again, when you put it on, if it's not bright enough, you can add a little more white. Little slashes, little lines there across where we did the shadow. A little dot in the center. You can reinforce if it's not light enough your stem, and then just along the edge. I do want to reinforce my blue on my little sheep's legs there. And this is going to be the same for this guy here. Just these little slashes going along the petals like that. It's a little bit of looking at a real shamrock, but also I'm taking some creative license and just making it a little decorative. Kind of the same for both of these stems. Okay, I'm going to use the same color for this one here. Jewel green, little white. Oh, that got into some blue. Hang on. And we have to do our edges. We can do that. It's not going to show up a lot with that sky color. So I'm going to add a little white and see if maybe that will be what we need to do. Just a little white on there. It just lifted it from the sky a little bit. And I'm kind of just doing the edges of the shamrocks. I'm not really going right into the petal. I love the shade of that one. It'd be fun to have more of those. You could add more if you'd like, even. Let me give a little shadow under our sheep's feet because he's kind of floating. I'm just going to take a wet, flat brush, a little of our dark, and maybe just give a little shadow under him. Just sort of sits him down. I think I need to go a little darker. And a little highlight, more blue on his legs, just to bring that out a little bit. I might just take, that is our tropical blue, maybe just a little light. Yeah, just kind of really brighten that up. Maybe a little on the tip of his ears to bring that back. I think that's it. He'd be cute with a little bow tie, wouldn't he? You could do all kinds of things with him now. So there we are. I think I will paint the edge of this in the jewel green, but let me just try it to swatch it to see, and then I can go do that and let you guys go. I kind of like that shade. Really like that jewel green a lot. And I know it's similar to the sky color, but I think it's a little dark enough. Let's do a little bit so we can see, and then we are all set. What a fun project. I hope you guys enjoy it and enjoy painting it. If you have any questions at all, reach out. I'm happy to answer them if you're stuck. I really like that. So I'm going to go ahead and paint the edges. I'm going to give it maybe a little shading in the creases. But there we go. There's our finished piece. Almost, except for this. I hope you enjoyed painting that with me. And thank you very much. I'll see you next time.